Kia ora, and welcome to Love Literacy Inspired, a podcast where we explore the real stories behind literacy journeys here in Aotearoa and beyond. I'm Heather Down, founder of Love Literacy and passionate advocate for structured, evidence-based teaching. And in each episode, I sit down with inspiring educators, parents, advocates, and learners from around New Zealand and around the world to hear how literacy has shaped their lives, their works, and their hearts. Whether you're in the classroom, at the kitchen table, or simply curious about how we learn to read and write, I'm so glad you're here, and let's dive in. And today I'm super excited to have Jess Manton. So Jess Manton is an Australian educator, widely respected for her deeply practical, classroom-grounded approach to structured literacy. And she is the director of Jess Manton Specialist Education Services. So welcome, Jess, and thank you so much for joining me on the first episode of season 2 of Love Literacy Inspired.
Oh, thanks, Heather. It's amazing to be here. And as I said before, I'm super excited to be on the podcast. So thank you for having
Oh,
me.
me too, and also to be able to, expand our horizons a little bit. For me, we were New Zealand based last year, and to be introducing some guests from other parts of the world is super exciting, and to get these different points of view. So yeah. So my first question is, tell me a little bit about you.
So I run a specialty education service. I live and work in a beautiful place called Port Macquarie in New South Wales. And I am a teacher by background, a secondary English teacher. And I did that for 12 or 13 years before I moved into private practice. I have a husband, Ben, and two beautiful children, Aurora, who's 6.5, and Spencer, who's 3, turning 4, but he's very tall, so he looks like he's about to start school, even though he's a couple of years off yet. Have a puppy dog. His name's Toby, Springer Spaniel, beautiful floppy ears. And yeah, just to enjoy where I live and where I work. So that's a little bit
Oh,
about me.
that's awesome. And I bet you 3 and 6 keep you quite busy.
They do, they
Yep.
certainly do.
Yep.
Yes, yes, but
Yeah.
motherhood is wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes, brings with it its own challenges, as you know, though.
Oh, it sure does. It sure does. Yeah. So well, I didn't actually realize that you'd been teaching for 12 or 13 years
Yeah.
in the secondary sector. So
Yes.
what first drew you into teaching?
So I think certainly a family element to it. My mum was a teacher. She actually moved into special education, and she was an adult literacy teacher working at the vocational college well, the government funded vocational college we have here in Australia called TAFE. And she did a variety of things. So as I was growing up, she did adult literacy, but she also did English as an additional dialect, working with refugees who had come from Iraq. And that was when we lived a little bit a little bit west from where we are now, so a place called Singleton. And she also worked with inmates at a local jail to us, teaching literacy.
Mm.
So she was an inspiration for me, and she ran a small tutoring business while I was at uni. But when I graduated from high school, that was 2005, I initially wasn't going to go into teaching. I did 12 months of a business degree, and then wasn't feeling it, and I was doing a little bit of tutoring as part of mum's business, and then decided to give it a try and make the change. And I sat in on my first lecture, and I knew straight away that was what I wanted to do. I think Mum was inspirational from the viewpoint that she really embodied the value of literacy as justice, and as acceptance for all, and to see her accepting of all people from whatever background. And I think in her job was quite humbling for her as well. She often worked with young people who came back to TAFE because they wanted to get their license or they'd started an apprenticeship and needed to pass in order to get their tickets, but just didn't have the reading or writing ability to be able to do what they needed to do. And so I think she always modeled to me the value of teaching literacy and mm, it being a pathway to access whatever you wanted to do in this life. So yeah, so
Yeah.
that's where the beginning of my journey into teaching.
Wow. That's really inspiring. That is really inspiring. Oh, I love it. I love it. And I can see how, yeah, specifically the literacy side of it, I can see how, you've had a few years within in mainstream teaching. I can see now where you were drawn into that. Yeah. So you did quite a few years of mainstream teaching. Was it specifically secondary school that you did?
Yeah, so I was secondary English trained. We talk about English teachers are interesting because you kind of veer in a certain direction. So, as an English teacher or a secondary English teacher, sometimes you often veer towards literacy and the mechanics, the writing process, reading, spelling, or you might be more of an English literature teacher. So, you might enjoy the classics and enjoy talking about the philosophy and ideas and concepts related to literature. Or you might be a mix of both, but you do tend to lend, or most English teachers have to be a mix of both, but you do kind of lend, you know, more towards one than the other. For me, I've always been interested in literacy, and when I did my teaching degree, so I did a combined degree of teaching and arts, majoring in English and minoring in modern history. Um, the I did a special interest project as part of a special education course. And so we're looking about 16, 17 years ago now. There was one special education course and specific learning difficulties weren't discussed. But I chose to do a special interest project on dyslexia. And at that time, it's interesting because I didn't know a lot about how kids learn to read or spell, and that's not something that was really part of my degree at a secondary level. My mum had always used a phonics approach. She was trained in the 60s and teaching into the 70s, so perhaps a little bit pre-balanced literacy movement. So she was amalgamation of things. So I hadn't really thought about it. And at that time, dyslexia was still very much associated with Erlen lenses or visual processing, colored
Yeah.
paper,
Yep.
those things that we now know, aren't evidence-based. And so I touched on and looked at that a little bit, but there wasn't a lot available in Australia at that time in that kind of space. So, coming back to what you were asking, I've always been interested, and I started teaching and taught for a period of time, and in that time, I worked with senior. I also worked with junior, high school, but I spent some time as the literacy coordinator here. So, the literacy coordinator at a high school is normally tasked with coordinating our NAPLAN testing, so our national
Mm.
literacy and numeracy testing. And there's not a huge amount of time allocated, and a lot of your time is actually spent, administering that for the year. And then we also had the national minimum standards test, which came in. So those tests required students to meet a certain level. I think it was a level 2 or a level 3 in order for them to be able to get their HSC certificate. So
Mm.
that was my role as well to bring in that testing. And then I was lucky enough that I began a master's degree. So I did a master's of education specializing in language and literacy. And that led me into doing some project-based work within a school context, which I can talk a little bit more about. But yeah, so literacy is kind of been a driving force for me. It's kind of been in my blood, and it's something that I can't seem, I've never been able to really shake. It's just something that's a inert drive to be a part of, I guess, or to work with, to
Ah,
work on.
yeah.
Mm.
Ah, wow. That's awesome. And isn't it fascinating that you say 16 years ago for dyslexia, and we're still kind of trying to dispel myths, and we're still trying to get on top of that massive topic that is dyslexia. It's an ongoing thing that we're faced with.
Yeah.
So, just talking a little bit about, or expanding a little bit on literacy, then, structured literacy and the science of reading. So 16 years ago, obviously, you said you didn't know much about how the brain learns to read.
Mm.
And certainly 12 to 13 years ago, we weren't learning about how the brain learnt to read. It's really only something that's come into play in a biggish way, I'd say about 6 years, maybe six, seven, in a
Mm.
really mainstream way. So,
Yeah.
um, um, can you tell me a little bit about how you encountered structured literacy, and how this impacted the way that you taught?
Mm. I might start a little bit earlier than that. I'll just kind of go back to my training. I think I discovered structured literacy when I did my formally discovered it when I did my MSL training, and that was in 2021, and that kind of opened my eyes. Um, but if I go back kind of to my work in the classroom, I think my training as a secondary English teacher was great with regards to paragraph and text level
Mm, mm,
approaches. So I spent a lot of time, working through the gradual release of responsibility model. So the I do, we do, you do,
mm,
and bringing in components of joint construction. And I remember having a conversation with a maths colleague because she said, we were talking about modeling the process. And she said, in maths, we do this. So we'll do it up on the board and then we'll work through a formula. And at that time, we were trying to really make a move at school for our content teachers to start to model their writing to students. And the school I was working in had a really proactive staff, and we're really wanting to help students with their writing. But I think, yeah, it was certainly more at that paragraph and text
mm,
level. So I think I had an awareness of what it means to teach explicitly or elements of explicit instruction.
mm.
And I think that's just because of the world that I worked in.
Yeah, yes, yeah, you're
And
from, yeah.
yeah, and I didn't really have much knowledge of how kids actually learnt to read or to spell, which is a little bit ironic, I think, because I'm a trained English teacher, so you would think that part of that but in my training, I think the assumption was, and perhaps it still continues to be so at a certain level, that by the time the kids reached us, they would be relatively proficient at a word and sentence level. and
Yes.
that they would be able to read at a level of fluency where they could start to work with concepts in novels or in longer texts. Would they, had enough of the mechanics that they would be able to piece together a paragraph with some, peel or paragraph structures that exist, point, explain, elaborate, those types of things. So that was certainly where my training kind of sat. And then we spent a lot of time at university kind of doing the literature-based studies. So I was very good at teaching kids how to analyze Shakespeare and how to write a really strong, well-evidenced piece of analysis about a text. And I just think, unfortunately, for secondary teachers who are still grappling with how to teach kids most effectively, we have seen a decline in the literacy abilities of students. So I think more is being required of teachers at a secondary level. But coming back to what you're talking about, structured literacy, I think, and I probably want to touch on here that as part of my master's degree, I did a project, and I actually did or had a look at the content strategies or the literacy strategies used by content teachers within the school context. And that work really stemmed from the works of Douglas Fisher and Nancy Frey.
Mm.
And they really accentuated the research base that was around explicit instruction using think alouds, teacher modeling, guided practice. I've got them written here so I can refer to
Yeah,
them.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Vocab instruction,
Yes.
questioning based on the text, oral questioning techniques, structured discussion, and writing in response to your reading. So and in my mind, that really fits with the suggestions made in the writing revolution, for example. So all writing teaching needs to
Yes.
come from content.
Yes.
Um, and yes, that gradual release of responsibility and the ongoing feedback. So in my mind, um, you know, I feel like I had some knowledge of parts of that structured literacy idea, but in terms of actually talking about the mechanics of learning to read and spell, I only really discovered that kind of thinking when I did my MSL training, and that was kind of the missing piece of the puzzle.
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
you've actually probably, in a funny kind of a way, I would rather do it your way because, yes, it's all really good learning about the phonemes and the graphemes and the connections and word parts, but the know-how, like okay, I've got the knowledge with what to teach, but
Mm,
the
mm,
how I think is where we have the main block that stands in the way.
yeah.
So, yeah.
But I think that something that was missing from my practice, and unfortunately, I think it's the structure of the schooling system, particularly the secondary schooling system, where we move between subjects. It's outdated based on what we know about how kids learn.
Oh,
But I think,
yeah.
yeah, the problem with that is that idea of mastery. I don't think I understood the significance of cumulative repetition and
Mhm.
building of skills. Yeah, we do build skills across, 7 to 12 in that high school context. But that level of repetition and practice and application that some kids need, particularly those with
Mm.
learning challenges. I don't think I realized the significance of that. And I still grapple with, and I'm not in the system anymore, but I still grapple with how that can look in a secondary context without us changing the way in which the schooling system's structured. And that's why I'm also really interested in mastery school, the mastery school system
Mm.
that's emerged in our Australian context because as far as, and I don't know a huge amount about it, but I know that every day the students that attend have a 2 hour literacy block.
Yes.
And if I reflect on English teaching, so um, when I was teaching year seven, year eight, for example, I would see those classes for seven 40-minute lessons a fortnight. So if you
Mm.
actually think about what that is, it's about 3 hours a week.
Mm.
And it's under the context of that they are getting literacy injections across subjects, or they should be. It's a cross-curricular priority. But there are limitations with that. If you've been trained as a science teacher or a visual arts teacher, then teaching sentence structure is probably not going to be something that you
Yeah.
feel really comfortable with.
Yeah, yeah, and that's really interesting because I've listened to a couple of podcasts where they have the teachers from the different subject areas all teaching a little bit of literacy based on their subject. And from what you're saying about you think that the structure actually needs to change, that's kind of where you need to look like a physical education teacher. I mean,
Mm,
there'll be so much domain specific language around anatomy or physical exercise and velocity and I don't know enough about physical education. But yes, to be able to delve into some of those words and take the literacy aspect about that, and same with visual arts, because again, there'll be that domain specific
mm,
language. And
mm,
it's almost like you need to, I don't know how you do it, see, because I've never taught in secondary
mm.
school, but you say you get that 40-minute block for those days a week. It'd be lovely if there was some kind of cumulative flow that came out so that when your 40-minute block was there, they're just accumulating knowledge of language and but you're teaching something specific for yeah,
And I'm sure there are many schools out there who are finding solutions
yeah.
and I think, I've been out of the classroom now for 5 or 6 years. So
Mm,
I think, there are very, very clever um, leaders who will
mm,
find ways or who probably are finding ways to manage that. But that was just, my observation
mm,
when I was in the classroom context,
mm.
the challenges that go along with that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's kind of a nice segue actually, because I'll just ask, after spending so long as your secondary teacher, and I know you sort of talked about your mum being inspiring and running a tutoring business. So what was the sort of point where you went, you know what, I'm actually going to follow in mum's footsteps and set myself up.
Well, I think, if I come back to what prompted me to take the MSL training, is, I'd been through and I'd completed my master of education. It took me 6 years and I was pregnant with my first child when I finally graduated. So,
Oh, yeah.
it was nice to get that study in.
Yes.
But that was very much focused, at a secondary level, as I said before.
Mm,
And then I had my daughter, Aurora, and I had a bit of a longish recovery process with her. And physically, I wasn't, uh, standing on my feet all day in the
mm,
classroom was going to be a little bit much for me. And so I kind of, I did 2 days a week or 3 days a week, and did that over, 2 or 3 years. Had my second after that time. But when I was off on maternity leave with Aurora, I did the MSL training, and it was eye-opening because I suddenly understood, yeah, how the brain works, how I can actually teach a child to read and spell. But what prompted me to go there was that when I came back part-time, I was on a job share arrangement, and I had a remedial year 9 English class. And I'd always taught kind of the mixed ability or seniors.
Mm.
And so it was my first remedial English class that I'd had. And I felt quite confident, being able to teach, writing at the paragraph and text structure. But I had students who, um, their reading fluency was low. They struggled to spell.
Mm.
They wrote very long run-on sentences with not much punctuation at all. And at that time, I just felt at a bit of a loss with what to do. And I think there are many English teachers, in working with remedial classes who don't always know what the best move forward is, particularly
Mm.
when the kids come to you, they're 14, 15 years of age. They have such a wide variety of gaps. Some are relatively proficient readers, but very poor spellers. Some can spell okay, but their reading is very jilted or slow. And the other part of it is that their self-confidence or self-esteem
I was
around
just going to
literacy
say, yeah.
is very rocky. So
Mm.
being in a classroom where there's 14, 15 kids, usually a smaller class in remedial, and then you also have kids with different kind of disabilities or a mixture of neurodivergence. Um, it's hard to know what to do. But I had one boy, and he was very smart, could get his ideas down, but he labored, and he really struggled to spell. And so my heart kind of, and I think the kids who are very much on that lower end in terms of ability, um, do often receive a higher level of support. The kids that do qualify for government funding, for example, or for school-based support. When I was in the classroom, my heart really sat with the kids who were the middle of the road kids, who weren't meeting their potential. So I talk about them as the 9 out of 20 kids. So the
Yeah.
kids that no matter how hard they tried, they always got the 9 out of 20 in the essay task, um,
Mm.
because so they were, functioning well enough. Okay, had
Mm.
probably been smart enough to get themselves through based on what they'd been given, but they hadn't been given enough of the structured literacy approaches, and at no fault of teachers. It's the outcome that came from the period of time in which they were
Yeah.
receiving their
Yeah.
education.
Mm.
Um, that they just didn't have enough of the code level mastery, to be able to lift themselves. And from in a high school context, the ability to remediate those gaps is very small. It's very, very
Mm.
hard to remediate for those kids that are kind of, they're humming along, they're flying under the radar. That's
Under the
kind
radar.
of,
Yeah.
and that's and I felt for those kids. So that's kind of, and this boy in my year 9 class was one of those kids. He was a true dyslexic. He was very intelligent, but he was yeah, he found it difficult. So I researched, and then I found the MSL training, and I did it. And then when I was off on maternity leave, I came in and I worked with a boy who was in year 8. And I worked with him as part of my practicum to do my 100 hours of practicum. And we learnt together. He was incredibly patient, and I was able to kind of plod my way through, and we were both learning as we went at the same time. So I owe a lot to him, and I owe a lot to his mum, and then also to the learning support team at the school, who were happy for me to come in and for him to come out of class so that I could do that with him.
Oh.
So yeah, so that was what led me to structured
Yeah.
literacy. But I feel I'm in a very privileged position, Heather, because yeah, it was very much a top-down approach for me.
Mm, mm.
So, working with kids at that HSC level, and I still do tutor kids. Not as many now. I'm feeling the longer I'm out of the classroom, the harder it gets. Um, but I still work with kids who are in year 12, and then I get the honor of working with kids at the other end who are just learning how to write their letters and say their sounds. So I
Yeah.
feel very honored that I have lived enough of a life and been able to seek out the different experiences to have that rounded view.
Oh yeah, yeah. And you've got some skills in there that I think a lot of tutors wish they were able, wish they had, because writing, we know, is one of the things that we've struggled to get our heads around, and the right way to teach and how to put together a structured writing scope and sequence. I mean, it's so many people have tried to put one together. And I find that's the thing that a lot of the questions that I get is, how do you teach your writing? How do you teach your writing? And so to have that, well, yeah, it's a gift. It's a gift. I might actually take the opportunity now, since because we've covered a lot, and I'm really keen to delve into what you're doing at the moment. And I think it again, it lends itself really nicely to continue the conversation, because you've set yourself up with all of this wonderful background knowledge that you've got around writing. And I know that you're in the process of producing something at the moment. And I just wondered if you'd like to tell us a little bit about that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that opportunity. I'd love to talk about it. So yes, I work in private practice. I have three educators who work alongside me. And it's been a bit of trial and error. This year, I have formalized our curriculum a little bit more. We're using Liz Kane's The Code as our spelling sequence.
That's awesome.
And it aligns really well
Mm,
with MSL, of course.
mm.
And so we've have that as our groundwork. What I like about the code is that it mixes both phonics and morphology in the sequence. So we've made some adjustments along the way to suit our context, but that's kind of the way I've had to kind of step back and think about our 1 hour sessions. We have 60-minute sessions. And I have wrestled with how to incorporate writing into those 60-minute sessions.
Yes.
And I know that you do a wonderful job, Heather, and I, have been soaking up your resources and the things that you do and using them to help me on my way. But we've made kind of the decision that we're going to view our lesson as a three-part sequence. So we'll have the phonics part, which is sort of 25 minutes, 30 minutes of the session. That brings in, as part of the code, it's sort of one lesson could be about a little bit about a phonics skill, OU saying our, for example, and then the next one might be about the prefix un, for example. So we'll kind of mix in and follow those lists with the code progression. And then the review component is the second kind of part, and that's a morphology game or base game. So I'm actually using the work of Louise Selby, and she has Morph Mastery. She offers a comprehensive intervention, but to suit our context, we're going to use her games in order to use those as a review. And then that's going to lead into the back end of that 60-minute portion. And what I am in the process of developing is called the 10-minute sentence routine. And it's the idea that logically, in a 60-minute session, we have probably about 10 minutes to devote to sentence level instruction. Um, coming from my context, I know that writing at a paragraph and full text level is important and the planning stages that go along with that. But in my mind, I know that secondary teachers do that well. So my thinking is that we can do what we can do with the time that we have. And I think that mastery at the sentence level is a precursor, and I think that's what they suggest in the writing revolution as well,
Yes,
and
yes.
maybe the writing rope, which I have as well.
Mm.
Joan, I've
Joan
forgotten her name.
Sedita.
Yes, thank you.
That's all right.
Yes, she's of the same ethos. So yeah, so I've just been thinking, what can we achieve within the scope of what we have if we can teach our kids how to write sentences at all sorts of complexity, then I think we've done a job really, really well there. So we're looking at having a scope and sequence of sentence
Awesome.
construction. So
Oh,
each lesson will be a frame, a sentence frame, and
yes.
it will begin from um, the noun and the verb. So
Hmm.
what makes a
Yep.
sentence? A noun and a verb, and then we'll move to the noun, the verb, the idea, and actually break that down. Okay, well, the sentence frame for this lesson is the noun, the verb, and the where, or the noun, the verb, and the when, and then we just keep building from there over a course. I think there's about 40 frames. And that's based on a mixture of work from other practitioners. I'm an avid researcher, but I never remember the names of the people. Um,
Oh,
I'm
yes, I'm the
terrible like
same.
that.
Yep, yep, same.
But everyone can be rest assured that it'll all be documented there.
Yep.
Um, but yeah. So the idea is that we'll have a sentence frame. We'll have some word cards. So we do some modeling of what that frame is. The students kind of build that sentence with some word cards. They write it, and then the most important part in my mind of this process is the apply it. So at the end
Mm.
of every session, we will have a reading. We do either a decodable or a controlled text, or if they're a little bit older, of course, something a real world text.
Yeah, authentic,
And
yeah.
the apply it component means that they actually have to write a sentence about that particular text using the frame that's been taught for that session.
Brilliant.
Um, and I think, I'm flexible when it's just me working with a student, and you mold and adapt, and your context would probably be a bit different, Heather, because you're just working one to one.
Mm.
But I have to think from a business perspective. I'm hoping to grow the business a little bit more. If I have 3 or 4 educators, then I need to have, I'm not calling it a scope and sequence, actually. I'm just calling it a progression of skills.
I was
So
just going to say, all like a framework. You
a
need a framework.
framework,
Yeah, I
yes,
like your
yeah.
idea of the sentence framework, and I see the same thing. It's you do need a framework.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so as long as we have those 3 components where we have a
Yeah.
phonics component, a morphology
Mhm.
component, and a sentence construction
Yep.
component that ties in with the reading in a 1 hour session,
Yes.
then I'm happy with
Yeah.
that.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's so brilliant. And then with the phonics, depending on what your new skill is, then
Yes.
your, as you say, your text and your reading not only covers off your skill, so you can, talking about the application, you
Mm,
can, and we all know that the words won't be cemented until we can actually make meaning from them. So you've
yeah.
got your words, you've written, spelled them, you do your spelling, you read your text,
Yeah.
but and you do your sentence framework, but your text not only just reflects your phonics or morphology component, but it also reflects your sentence framework. So
Yes.
and I always feel like I that's almost like the missing piece. It's like
Mhm.
you've got the text and it can do so much more than just fit the reading. Like,
That's right.
yeah.
That's
So
right.
yeah, reading, writing, spelling, but it if it's following that beautiful circle, it's it's like this beautiful complete lesson. Yeah.
And
Oh,
I think the idea is that the trajectory will be from sort of year one up to year five, and
yep.
then we can kind of look as kids head into year six and year seven. You know, they should have a good enough level of proficiency or mastery that we can then bridge the gap into the longer text writing and the different
Yeah.
types of text. So, you know. I know that you do lots of cause and effect and problem and solution.
Problem and solution. We've
Yeah,
done opinion, and opinion writing was a lovely segue into persuasive
yeah,
writing.
yeah.
Yeah, just like the language leveled up. And funnily enough, you know, and you'll probably have this, but and you can definitely you can empathize and relate to it. But when you get a student that's sitting in front of you going, oh, are we doing persuasive writing this week? Or, oh, what are we doing? Are we doing opinion writing? Because they love it so much because all of a sudden they've got all this language and vocabulary that's accessible to them and a nice, simple framework to put it together.
Yeah,
Like it's really magical.
yeah, yeah. And I am excited. It's a big project to make it all tie in together. But I think there's lots of resources for classroom teachers.
Yeah.
And classroom teachers, time's on their side. You know, in a primary context, they have, you know, an hour a day that they can
Yeah.
spend.
Yeah.
But you know, for me, and that's why I'm in the process of developing this, and the aim is that to make it available for other interventionists or practitioners.
Mm,
But
mm.
it's just it's finding something that fits within the confines of our context that still
Yes.
aligns with the research,
Mm,
and follows that phonics progression. Because you do
yeah.
get sentence resources, and then you go, but this little one hasn't learnt about those particular
Mm,
patterns. They haven't done control R yet. So I
mm,
really shouldn't be giving them, you know, a sentence that has a level of phonics skills that's 12 months or two
mm,
years above where they're actually at.
mm.
So this way, you know, the different components of the lesson or the session aligns. Yes, I haven't been able to find anything, and as you said, I think
Yeah.
it's a missing gap for interventionists in
Yes.
particular. And
Yes.
and
And
we yeah,
yep. I should, oh, so I interrupted and I
that's
need
okay.
to be so careful with that. So apologies for
That's
interrupting, but
okay.
I'm really excited. I'm excited about what you're saying. But yes, that's the other thing, and that's the reason why, with a lot of my free resources that I feel that as an intervention specialist myself, there were just so many things that I didn't have access to. And that's why I create them. And then I'm thinking, well, if I need them, then somebody else must need them. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, share the
And yeah.
knowledge. Share the
And I'm lucky that I come from the perspective that I know where they're headed, and I know
mm,
the skill base that they need, and I know what they're receiving in the secondary classroom. So
mm.
and I know that in the primary stage, time is of the essence. So
Yes,
we just have to
yes.
get them um
Mm,
moving with those skills, and unfortunately phonics is just not enough. And I think interventionists know that,
yes.
but it's that, you know, it's that how. It's like I know it's important. I know I need to be doing writing. I know I need to be doing sentences,
But
but
how do I put it
how
all
and how
together?
do I do it? How do I systematize it? So
Yeah.
how do I ensure that it's a cumulative trajectory of developing mastery?
Mm,
Because, you know, I'm doing it, but it might be
mm,
a little bit ad hoc, you could say.
mm,
And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you're expanding or building a business, and you want to give the opportunity of being able to write effectively to as many kids as you can, then you know, a system
mm.
makes a lot of sense. So yeah, so that's in the works at the moment, Heather.
That's so exciting. So the 10-minute sentence routine. So yeah, once that's live, you'll definitely have to share that with me so that I can share it out as well.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Ah, very exciting. And yeah, I mean, these sorts of things just, they get me rubbing my hands together because they're so needed. They're so needed. All right, so my next question is around the human cost and the hope. So getting into the heart of things. So you work closely with children who have struggled. What do you wish more people understood about these learners?
There's probably 3 points that I can touch on about, um, gaining knowledge about our learners that really struggle. The first is that remediation takes time for these learners,
Yes.
um, and that um, you know evidence-based approaches are gold standard, of course. We want to be making sure that we use quality synthetic phonics approaches with our younger learners. But there's also the acknowledgement that it's not always a quick fix. So I know in schools sometimes when they look at doing tier two intervention with small groups, they look at the growth trajectory and they go, okay, well, we'll do 6 to 12 months of intervention and then we'll progress these students on and hopefully we've done all that we need to do. But I think for many of the kids that you and I see, Heather, is that it is a long process that can take years to fill the gaps sometimes.
Mm.
And that could be that's often due to a range of different problems, including working memory and processing speed, for example. And all dyslexic thinkers are different, of course. It's a
Mm.
spectrum, isn't it? So you will have children who experience it in different ways and have particular challenges with different aspects of language and reading and spelling. Um, and the second thing that I think we can never overemphasize is the need to support our learners in terms of emotionally support them.
Yes.
Often learning is hard. We need to remember
Mm.
that these little learners who need lots of repetition and lots of time to practice um, sit in a classroom all day where they feel a little bit out of place sometimes,
Mm.
who feel that they're not keeping up with some of the others. And that can have a real impact on their self-perception and their confidence, and also their resilience to keep trying. And it's
Oh,
backwards,
yes.
isn't it? They're the learners that need the practice, that need the repetitions. But the more they encounter struggle or failure, the more resistant they are. And that kind of leads us into that concept of the Matthew
I
effect.
was just going to
Um,
say that Matthew effect because that was what we experienced with my son. Is that
yeah,
yeah, excited to get to school, and then school just wore him down year after year after year, and then we ended up with this 11-year-old with anxiety and having anxiety attacks and stress, and it was so sad. It was so
yeah,
sad to watch that by 11 years old you have anxiety.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So that was the second thing. And then I think the acknowledgement that progress is possible.
Yes, yes.
It takes time, but we can bring these kids on with the right kind of instruction. But for intervention, particularly, we have to be respectful of their journey and meet them at their point of need, and be respectful that, if they're coming to us at age 11, 12, then probably, a basic decodable reader
Oh,
that's
yes,
targeted at a 6-year-old is not going to be appropriate for
that's
them.
it.
So
Mm.
actually thinking about the materials that you're using, and thinking, okay, is this respectful? And luckily there are more and more resources that are being developed that are, for older readers, catch-up
Mm.
readers. They're often called. And if you're based in Australia, I mean, Spelled, we have our state groups of Spell, but Spell New South Wales in particular have a wonderful online shop with lots of decodable readers
Yes.
available, and they also have
Mm.
resources that you can actually. So they've actually charted the decodables based on particular common scopes and sequences. So they'll have
Wow.
sounds right, for example, and then they will have charted the decodables that match with particular skills at different points in time. So that's obviously been a gigantic effort that they've
Yes.
done. But that's I've used that within my own clinic to get a mix of different decodables, but making sure that they match at different point
Yeah.
levels. Yes. So that's
Oh,
three
yeah,
things.
no, that's really good. And yeah, and we were talking a little bit before, and I sort of feel like too with those older learners just building up that confidence, and they matter. They're intelligent. And I think that's what a lot of our dyslexic learners just fall into, that trap of that they don't think they are intelligent, but they but
Mm,
they actually they are. And
mm,
it's just giving them the right tools and
yeah,
teaching them the right way.
absolutely.
So, what gives you hope when you look at the future of literacy? That's a big question, isn't it?
I think it's an exciting time for literacy, Heather.
Mm,
I think we're getting a real momentum. I know certainly in Australia, there's been such a shift in the last few years um, around structured literacy and um, cognitive load theory
yes,
and explicit instruction,
instruction.
direct
Yep.
instructional approaches.
Mm,
I think we're moving and heading in the right direction. I think it's also a time, and I think it's important to acknowledge that it can be overwhelming for teachers who feel,
mm.
um, who aren't there with all the change yet. They're
Yes,
still
yeah, yeah,
still
because it
learning.
it's such a big body. It's such a big body, and you've been teaching for 6 years. I've been teaching for 6 years, and we're still learning. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Um, and I think the introduction of so many free resources, though, I mean, we were talking about Oka,
Yes.
and also another website or organization that are doing excellent thing is Aero. So that would be the Australian
Oh,
Educational
yes.
Research
I love
Organization.
Aero. Yeah.
Mm. And something that's worth mentioning here is that they released a free course that you can access that's all about sentence structure and how to teach it effectively. So that's I went through and did it the other day, and I thought, oh, this is excellent for teachers. So,
Awesome.
but in some ways, there's so much stuff that it can be overwhelming. But picking and choosing the right things. But yeah, I've lost your question, but
You're
yeah,
answering it beautifully. What gives you hope? And
yes,
it and
yeah,
it and it is and it is all these things. We've got so much going on.
yes.
Yeah, and it is exciting.
Mm,
I feel like 2026 starting this year, it does feel exciting. In New Zealand, we've got structured literacy rolling out through all the schools. Yeah, it's going to be really amazing to see what happens and where we go.
and
Yeah.
hopefully, we'll move along the line of less students needing outside intervention and more
Yes.
more progress at an
Yeah.
in-school level.
Yeah.
And I'm hopeful that we'll see more of a move for speech pathologists and occupational therapists to um, transition into the schooling system as well.
Mm.
I think there's desperate need for those services to be offered at an in-school level, particularly speech work for those kids that have developmental language disorders, because
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
something that doesn't often get picked up,
Mm.
and it can be something that's really important, and something for a speech
Yeah.
pathologist to really work with a student on,
Yeah. I
because
sort of feel like there is a little bit, and this is something that I'd love to see coming together a little bit more, but we have a little bit of a disconnect with that because you've got your educational psychologists who will be diagnosing dyslexia, and then you've got your psychiatrists, I think, who are diagnosing ADHD, and then you've got your speech pathologists who are diagnosing developmental language disorder. And
Mhm.
so we've got three sort of areas, and we know that dyslexia really occurs alone. There's comorbidity of dyslexia and DLD or dyslexia and ADHD,
That's right.
um, dyscalculia,
Yep.
dysgraphia, dyspraxia. So we've got all of these things, and yet we need to get a diagnosis from three different places. So for me, seeing more, oh, I can't think of the right word, but joint work or
Yeah, teamwork or a
teamwork,
yeah, more
thank
team
you. Thank you.
team-based approach to
Team,
remediation.
yes,
Yes.
because of the comorbidity that we
Yes.
experience. So
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And just before we get into a little bit, we've got a couple of things to cover before we finish up. So um I'd love you to tell me anything that you want that's really you're passionate about, or you don't feel like I've asked the question, or is there something on your mind that you just love to share? Um, yeah, I'd love for you to tell me anything there. And if you think we've covered enough, that's okay.
I will talk about one point because I am very passionate about game-based learning.
Oh yeah,
Um,
me too.
yes, yes. And I think many parents of the children I work with come to me and say, really struggle to do the in between at home, to stay motivated and to do do activities at home. And I just think games are such a powerful way of engaging learners in reading and
Mhm.
spelling and things without them even realizing that they're doing it.
It gets them
Um,
in the green zone.
Yes, yes. So, and there's lots of things on the market.
Mm.
And I would once again encourage people to find things via, the right channels. So I know in Australia Spelled is a wonderful channel. You've got your wonderful Yeet. And there are other practitioners. Zoe Loudon is a local MSL therapist here, and she has a range of books and games as well. Um, Also, the UFly apps
Yes.
page. You
Yeah.
can you can create games with your own word lists,
Mm.
which is amazing for parents. If a word list, if there's a particular skill that's being worked on in intervention, so AI, AY, for example, and you're giving a list of words, you can go to the UFly apps page and it has a game generator. Type the words in, does it for you. All sorts of games. So there's lots of options, but I just really want to accentuate the value of game-based practice in between.
Mm.
The other thing I want to talk about too is that coming back to decodable readers, we've got a number of students who have really enjoyed working with decodable chapter books. So
Mm.
the Fox Kids series by Little Learners, Love Literacy is one that's really popular for us, and also um, the I'm trying to think of what it's called, the Ben Bug series, and this is by the Decodable Readers Australia. More of these are getting released as well. So I think sometimes parents are at a loss of what particular reading material to give their young ones. And I
Yes.
think decodable chapter books are really wonderful for those kids that are in year 3, 4, 5
Mm.
that are not reading efficiently on their own yet, but want something that's a little bit
More
better
mature.
suited. Yeah, better
Yeah,
suited.
yeah. That's actually a common question that gets asked in a lot of the forums. What books do we
Mm,
recommend? So there's some
mm.
really, I've written a few notes down there as well. So
Mm. Yeah, so I think
yeah.
that's my, only other contribution. I don't really have other questions for you, but I'm just, I love resources, and I know that not everybody has the expendable income, and there are lots of free things that you can access. But value of games, and value of the right books that honor and respect where the learner is at is important.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. And also, where is the best place to find you on social media?
So I have an Instagram page, and that's at Jess Manton SES, standing for Specialist Education Services, Jess Manton SES.
Cool.
And you can also find us online, jessmantonses.com. And we're also on Facebook as our full business name on there.
Awesome. Oh,
Yeah.
that's really good. And just before we finish up today, we're going to do something new for season two, and you're my very first guest that I'm doing this with. So I'm actually really excited about this. So basically, what it is it's called the note for the next guest. And so it's basically some, can you impart some words of wisdom, encouragement, a quote, or reflection to our next guest on the podcast?
Thanks, Heather. I spent some time this morning thinking about this and I thought, okay, well, what do I need to hear? So maybe it's actually more about a message for me, but I hope the next podcast um, attendee responds to it.
Oh, I'm
Um,
excited.
um, I reflected on us as practitioners, and we are thinkers and feelers. We work with children and we care for them, and we want the best for them, of course. And I think we are often avid researchers and avid learners. Um, and I can fall myself into the habit of always wanting to do more or be more or
Oh,
find more.
yes.
Even this morning, I was thinking, I've read The Writing Revolution, but maybe I should go and attend the course. Maybe if I do the course, then that would be a really good step. So I think sometimes we can get into the trap of thinking that we're not doing enough. But the message is sometimes less is more. And I wanted to make reference to something. So the I've been reading a book and it's called Don't Believe Everything You Think. So it's about being able to quieten your mind
I need
in
to do that.
times of anxiety. And I'm going to read a little bit here, and this book's written by Joseph Newen, and he talks about in Japanese culture, there's a beautiful word called mushin, and it's translated to no mind. And the definition is so mushin is achieved when the mind is free of random thoughts, free of anger, free of fear, and particularly free of ego. When mushin is achieved during combat, there is an absence of loose or rambling thoughts. It leaves the practitioner free to act and react without hesitation. He reacts according to all of the study and training that has brought him to this point, relying on not what you think should be your next move, but what your trained, instinctive, subconscious reaction directs you to do. And it prompted me to think about when I experience mushin, and it's when I'm working with a student. It's when I've done my planning, I've got my lesson routine, but I just am in the moment and I teach, and I rely on, you know, what I have, what's instinctual for me to do
Mhm.
when I work with that particular student. And that's the time when I'm most calm. Often I call my mum on the way home from work to talk about my day. And she has reflected. She said, you can tell when you've been with a student because you just sound better in the voice. You just sound more calm.
Yeah.
So in those moments, um, value Mushin and
Yes.
get out of your head a little bit when you find yourself thinking that you always need to do or be more or have more access to research. And it's important, but trust that your instinct and your knowledge and your training will keep you in that, will keep you in the right place. Will put you in the right place for that individual in front of you or person that you're interacting with. So there you
That
go. So it's a
is
little bit long and
beautiful.
convoluted, but it
I love
was
it.
meaningful this morning for me, and I thought it might be meaningful for somebody
No,
else.
I love it. I love it. And I mean, I can so relate. Like, get out of my head. Get out of your head. Sometimes less is more. I'm very much like that. I won't hog up too much of this time where I keep thinking, and the next thing, and the next thing, and the next. But I also know a few people that I've spoken to who will love that. And I've spoken to them recently, and they will absolutely adore that quote. So, yeah. So, thank you.
Mm.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Jess, for joining me on episode 1 of season 2. I
Yes,
have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
me too.
The width and the breadth and the depth of what you've achieved over the years has been quite amazing. And I I know that your students and the business that you're setting up, the students will be in good hands, the business will thrive, just based on your passion and your dedication. And I'm really so excited for the 10-minute sentence routine.
Mm.
That is a gap that needs to be filled. So yeah, we definitely do have a lot to be excited for.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
just got to put it together now, Heather.
Just got to put it together. Well, it's out there now. I mean, you've already put it out there with a little bit of a teaser,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think yeah, that it would definitely be well received. So
Thanks, Heather.
yeah. So, Ngā for joining me today on Love Literacy Inspired. If this conversation sparked a thought, a question, or a sense of connection, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to see it too. You can listen, follow, and join the conversation on Spotify and YouTube, or find more at my website, which is Love Literacy. Until next time, keep sharing stories, keep asking questions, and keep loving literacy. Thank you so much.